Well, hello and welcome back to Highway Farty, Episode 3, exploring St. Louis history by visiting the places we drive by every day without even realizing history happened here. Now, I am at the Wendy's restaurant on Gravois and Hydraulic. Hydraulic. Strong name, Hydraulic. Great Hydraulic. Actually, Bamberger is the street to my right. So it's between Bamberger and Hydraulic. I just like saying Hydraulic. And I will explain to you in a moment why I am here. I am hot on the trail of a bordello. Not just any bordello. The bordello. The whorehouse that Babe Ruth, as we learned in the last episode, that Babe Ruth considered to be his favorite in the whole country. And coming from Babe Ruth, that is quite a testimonial. We learned in the last episode from an out-of-print book, a biography on Babe Ruth, that the name of this bordello that he was so fond of was called the House of the Good Shepherd. And so with that information, I went to the city directory, let my fingers do the walking through the white pages, and I found where the House of the Good Shepherd is located, was located. It was located right here. Right where I am seated now. Unfortunately, was not the bordello. Womp, womp, womp. Could not have been it. For one thing, it's too far away. We know from interviews with Babe Ruth's teammates that when he would get to St. Louis, he would check into the team hotel, which by the end of his career was at the Chase Hotel, and would immediately decamp for this bordello that he liked to visit so much. In fact, he would live at the bordello while he was in St. Louis, playing the Browns, or during the postseason, playing the Cardinals. And so this would have just been a little too far for him, I think. Now, the other reason why this could not have been it is a lot more apparent than that. This site where I am presently talking to you from, this was a famous convent. And in a minute, I'll walk around and show you the grounds. But I want to explain a little bit about this convent. The convent was called the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, shortened to be House of the Good Shepherd. The mission of the Sisters of the Good Shepherd was to assist what were then called fallen women. Women who were, prostitutes, women who were unmarried but had children, women who were on the street. And so the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, operating from the convent that was right here, assisted those women. That assistance, however, came with quite a cost. This was a legendary, notorious Magdalene Laundry. I will explain in a moment what that means, what a Magdalene Laundry is. But because this was a convent, highly unlikely that, number one, if anyone watching ever had a Catholic nun as a teacher, you knew there was not going to be any of this kind of monkey business going on here. Secondly, Babe Ruth had great reverence for the Catholic Church. He didn't have reverence for too much of anything, but the Catholic Church was something that he held sacred because he attributed the Catholic Church to making him a man, to making him the Babe Ruth that we know today from the derelict that he was, the delinquent growing up on the streets of Baltimore. He grew up in a Catholic orphanage in Baltimore. Now, he was not an orphan. His parents couldn't handle him, couldn't discipline him, so they sent him off to this orphanage. And it was at that orphanage where he spent his entire childhood for the most part. And he credits a brother Matthias, for making him the person he became, making him Babe Ruth. So because of that reverence for the Catholic Church, it's highly unlikely that he would defile that by coming to a convent. And even if you were to suspend your belief for a moment and say that, well, just maybe some of the girls here at the convent had a side business going and they would meet Babe Ruth outside for their sexual favors. No. That did not happen. Nope. But what this convent was, let me walk around and show you a little bit about this place, because it was enormous. It was one of the largest in the region. It covered this entire shopping center. It was here from the 1840s until 1969, when the sisters that ran the convent decided that it had become too expensive to maintain. So they sold it to a developer who developed a shopping mall here. This was not the original shopping mall on this site. It was developed originally as a Kmart. And the Sisters of the Good Shepherd moved up near Umsel. They've since moved again. They are in Olivet. And their mission is still the same: to assist women in need, women and children in need. They don't use the term fallen women anymore, but that was their mission. Now, earlier I said that that assistance came with a cost. In exchange for the room and board that the women would receive here, they were basically forced into servitude. They had to work for their room and board, and the reason it's called the Magdalene Laundry, the laundry part of it, is that the sisters that ran the place had to find some way of supporting themselves, so they took in laundry from outside, and they had a commercial laundry on this site. I don't know what that noise is, but they had a commercial laundry on this site, and the sisters would take in laundry from outside, and they would make money that way. The labor for the laundry was provided by the women who lived here. They were forced into labor. If they didn't work, they didn't have a place to stay. And this, of course, became very, very controversial. By the mid-1950s, the word was starting to get out about the abuses that took place here at this Magdalene Laundry. And this wasn't the only one, by the way. The Magdalene Laundry started in Ireland as a way of sheltering these women, and they came up with the idea that, hey, we're going to take in laundry. We're going to force them to work for their room and board by working in the commercial laundry facility under horrible conditions, sweatshop conditions. Where was I? Under horrible conditions, they were forced to work in this laundry. And it wasn't just here in St. Louis. These places were all over the world, these Magdalene laundries. And as I said, by the 1950s, word had gotten out. And they started closing these things down because of every time I talk, that car decides it's going to make that noise. All right, well, I was just about wrapped up there, and rather than fight the noise from that car, I was obviously having some kind of a wheel bearing issue or stuck brake caliper, whatever. The wheels weren't spinning. Rather than fight that noise, just wrap up here and talk a little bit about what happened to these Magdalene laundries. As I said, once the word of the abuses got out, starting in the 1950s and certainly well into the 60s, they started closing down little by little. This one closed in 1969. The last Magdalene Laundry closes in 1994 in Ireland. Joni Mitchell, the legendary 60s, 70s rock star, folk star, whatever you want to call her, she gets wind of these Magdalene laundries and she writes a song about them. She was fascinated by them, and her song takes off. And lately, there have been a lot of movies and a lot of stories told about these Magdalene laundries. So, even though this was not the bordello that Babe Ruth patronized, still found an interesting story here that explains the laundry part of it. As for the Magdalene part of it, that's, of course, St. Mary Magdalene. And to explain her story, which I don't know that her story needs an awful lot of explanation, but I did find out some things interesting about her, I need to do a location change away from this strip mall. Okay, I want to talk about this statue behind me because this is Mary Magdalene, and I am in Brentwood at the corner of Manchester and Brentwood Boulevard. And let's talk about this statue. I'm going to get your take on it. What do you think? Does something look a little off about that statue to you? Now, what she's doing here is she is getting ready to anoint the feet of Jesus. The problem with that is there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of evidence that she was a prostitute. And in the Bible, it is a prostitute who anoints the feet of Jesus. So, talk about Mary Magdalene. I had always thought she was a prostitute. That's how I learned it. If I were producing a newscast, I would chyron her as Mary Magdalene Saint/FMR prostitute. Turns out there's not a lot of biblical evidence that she was a prostitute. In fact, there's none. All we really know about her is she was a close follower of Jesus, a friend of Jesus, a financial supporter of Jesus. This idea of her being a repentant prostitute came about because of Pope Gregory in the year 600 in a sermon that he did in which he said she was a repentant prostitute. We don't know. We do know that Jesus exorcised her demons. We don't know what those demons were, and she was eternally grateful to him for healing her. That's it. That's all we know. But it's that link between prostitution and Mary Magdalene, where the Magdalene Laundries, who had the mission of supporting fallen women, prostitutes, and that sort of thing, that's where that link comes from Mary Magdalene. So we did not come any closer to finding the legendary bordello that Babe Ruth patronized. However, I do think we hit on an interesting sidebar, what we call it. We're going to reframe things a little bit, a little break from the bordello hunt, but I'm going to get back on track next time, and I am going to take you someplace I think you're going to be surprised with what I find. Thank you for joining me on Highway Farty. We'll see you soon.